The metal measuring tape made a small clicking sound as it locked at exactly 73 inches, 1 inch above the maximum allowed fence height according to the Brookside Meadows HOA covenant, and Patricia Weatherby, the board president, stood there with her clipboard documenting the violation with the kind of precision usually reserved for crime scene investigators, which is exactly how this whole nightmare started for Marcus Chen on a Tuesday morning when he was just trying to enjoy his coffee in his backyard and spotted Patricia crouched near his fence with what appeared to be professional surveying equipment. Quick note before we begin. This is a fictional, dramatized story for education and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental. This story is inspired by common HOA situations people talk about online. All names and details here are fictional. The fascinating thing about moments like these is how they reveal what people actually care about. Not safety, not property values, but the power to enforce rules down to the literal inch. Marcus had installed the cedar privacy fence 8 months earlier after getting written approval from the Architectural Review Committee, hiring a licensed contractor, and submitting detailed plans that showed a 72-inch fence height, which was exactly what the CC&Rs specified as the maximum. But now Patricia was claiming his fence measured 73 inches and was therefore in violation, subject to a $500 fine and mandatory removal. Marcus, who worked as a quality control engineer for an aerospace company and was the kind of person who color-coded his tax receipts and kept a spreadsheet of his grocery spending, immediately pulled out his phone and started photographing Patricia's measuring process, which seemed to visibly annoy her, but she couldn't exactly tell him to stop documenting her documentation. "Mr. Chen, this fence clearly exceeds the height restriction," Patricia said without looking up from her clipboard, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who genuinely enjoyed catching rule violations. "You have 14 days to bring it into compliance or face escalating fines." Marcus took a slow sip of his now-cold coffee and asked her to show him exactly where she was measuring from, because the CC&Rs specified height measurement from natural grade level, and he wanted to make sure she was using the proper baseline, which made Patricia's jaw tighten in that way that suggested she wasn't used to being questioned. She pointed to a spot near the base of his fence where the ground dipped slightly, and Marcus immediately saw the problem. She was measuring from the lowest point in his yard, not from the natural grade level at the fence line itself, which would make any fence appear taller than it actually was according to standard building code interpretation. When Marcus pointed this out and asked if she'd consulted with a professional surveyor to establish the proper grade measurement, Patricia's response was to say that the HOA board had extensive experience with fence violations and didn't need outside consultation. Then she handed him the official violation notice and walked away. What Patricia didn't know was that Marcus had installed that fence specifically after researching every single word of the CC&R document, that he had the original architectural approval in a labeled folder in his file cabinet, and that the contractor who built it had provided a certification of the exact height measurements taken from multiple points using professional equipment. Marcus spent that evening rereading the covenant section on fence heights, and what he found on page 47 of the CC&R document was extremely interesting. The measurement protocol specified that height should be determined from the established grade at the fence line, measured at no fewer than 3 points along the fence length, with the average height used for compliance determination. Patricia had taken exactly one measurement from the lowest point without averaging anything. The next morning, Marcus sent a certified letter to the HOA board requesting the specific measurement protocol they had used, copies of all measurements taken, and the qualifications of the person who performed the inspection, which is the kind of response that makes board presidents realize they're not dealing with someone who will just pay the fine and go away. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. If you're finding value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever experienced a similar HOA or neighborhood situation, feel free to share your story in the comments. The board's response came 12 days later, a terse email from Patricia stating that his fence remained in violation, the fine would be assessed, and further obstruction of board authority could result in additional penalties, which was when Marcus decided to hire Rebecca Martinez, a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for not backing down. Rebecca reviewed his documentation, examined the CC&Rs, and started laughing which initially concerned Marcus until she explained that the HOA's measurement procedure was not only wrong but potentially opened them up to selective enforcement complaints if they weren't applying the same absurdly strict standard to every other fence in the development. "Here's what we're going to do," Rebecca said during their consultation, spreading out the covenant documents on her desk. "We're going to request that the HOA conduct a comprehensive fence height audit of the entire development using the exact same measurement protocol they applied to your fence. And we're going to document every single variance we find." The legal principle at play here was selective enforcement, which occurs when an HOA applies rules inconsistently to different homeowners. If the board was measuring Marcus's fence from the absolute lowest grade point without averaging multiple measurements, they needed to measure every fence in the development the same way, and Rebecca suspected that Patricia's own fence, along with several other board members' properties, might not survive that level of scrutiny. Marcus filed a formal appeal of the violation citing the measurement protocol errors, requested a hearing before the full board, and included a proposal that the HOA hire a licensed surveyor to measure not just his fence, but every fence in all 47 homes in Brookside Meadows, with costs split between the HOA reserve fund and homeowners found in actual violation, which was essentially calling Patricia's bluff. The board hearing was scheduled for the following month, and Marcus spent the intervening weeks doing something that would have seemed obsessive if it wasn't so strategically brilliant. He walked the entire neighborhood with his own measuring tape and camera, documenting every fence he could see from public streets and sidewalks, noting heights, conditions, and any obvious variances, all carefully logged in a spreadsheet with photographs and GPS coordinates. What he discovered was remarkable. At least 14 fences appeared to be at or above 72 inches, including one that belonged to Tom Jensen, the friendly neighbor 2 streets over whom Marcus sometimes saw at the community pool, and more interestingly, Patricia Weatherby's own backyard fence appeared to be a solid 74 inches tall when measured the same inconsistent way she'd measured Marcus's. 3 other homeowners had received the same violation letters that month, all for fences measuring between 72 and 73 inches, and all had been given the same 14-day compliance order. But when Marcus cross-referenced the addresses against public property records, he noticed something interesting. None of the board members or their immediate neighbors had received any fence violation notices, despite several visible height issues. At the board hearing, Marcus arrived with Rebecca, 300 pages of documentation in labeled binders, and a PowerPoint presentation that would have made his aerospace company's quality assurance team proud, while Patricia sat at the head table flanked by 4 other board members